The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
So we're going to maybe use some of this on much adored podcast, Gone By Lunchtime.
Yep.
But otherwise it will be for a print
about
piece.
The title of that.
Why?
Piece,
Oh, I see.
Gone By Lunchtime.
That's the way we call our podcast, as you know.
Yes, as I know, but
It's
it
not.
is slightly worrying when I'm here for that.
Or gone by 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Your approach so far is to be continued. So, kia ora tatou, my name is Toby Manhire and this is Gone By Lunchtime Extra, a special marking the first anniversary of that white smoke moment when Winston Peters appointed Jacinda Ardern the Pope of New Zealand. And as luck would have it, our guest star on this podcast special is Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, who popped into the Gone By Lunchtime studio on Wednesday morning. You can read the print version of this podcast at thespinoff.co.nz. As ever, 1,000 thanks to our sponsors Flick. Click through from any politics post on the Spinoff and you can snag a sweet, sweet deal for your electricity. I started by asking the PM to cast her mind back to a year ago, the final days of coalition negotiations. Probably about a week out from that kind of press conference?
Probably around the time I
days?
found out I was pregnant, actually.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
Somewhere in
Tell
around
us
there.
about that day. Another quiet day.
Look, I don't know how many details are necessary.
Well,
Yeah.
all. As many as you're willing to. I mean, what I was going to ask is how confident you were at that point, not in terms of conception, but in terms of
Yes.
in terms of
Absolutely no idea.
no idea.
Absolutely none. You know, I've always said that it was actually the moment when, a minute or two before the now Deputy Prime Minister made the announcement that I thought it was going our way, but not before that. Yeah.
So you would have, if you inhaled some truth serum, you would have gone 50-50?
I would have gone 50-50.
50-50.
In fact, we would every so often canvass the room because there were we had few extra people who were at the table with us. For a time, Annette King was with us for those negotiations. And from time to time, we'd canvass, how do you think it's going? And at most of that negotiation period, it was moving around 50-50.
And in the year since, or I guess winding back even the campaign through and then the last year, it's been non-stop. I remember when I spoke to you at the start of the year and I said, have you had a chance to kind of take it all in? And you said you were planning to do that over summer, but then
I did
you
not.
decided to have a break instead over summer. So the same question, really. I mean, it's like you've lived a few lifetimes in that.
Yes.
For normal persons, civilian lifetimes
Yes.
in that. Have you taken stock of it?
No. And I know I haven't because every so often I still catch myself thinking, you know, in these little brief moments when sitting on the UN General Assembly floor. You know, a year ago, would I have seen myself in that position on behalf of New Zealand? No. So there are these still quite surreal moments, but there's so little time for that. You know, no one wants to hear that I'm sitting there having these moments. They want to know I'm just cracking on with the job, and so that's what I do.
And do you, when you're on the UN floor having that catch yourself moment, do you have a sort of, is it what? I mean, how does that manifest itself? Is it a 3-second
about
holy
that
fuck type moment? Or what
no, just really more an appreciation because you know when you're someone who's been interested in politics since you were 17 years old, those the idea of being able to represent New Zealand at that level in that context at a time that's pretty heightened, would I have imagined myself in that place? Absolutely not. So I better, you spend a couple of seconds on it and then get on with it because you've got a speech to give or an interview to do or something else that takes over that little space and time. Yeah. But equally, I have those moments knowing that I've got my 3-month-old daughter next to me as well. There's lots of surprising things that have happened in the last year.
So it sort of is surreal for you sometimes.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is. But actually, I've, one thing I will say is that I think actually most political leaders find the idea of representing their country to a certain extent surreal. Yeah, because it is. There's nowhere beyond that. So I don't think I'm alone on that. I just don't spend too much time thinking about it.
The 3-month-old daughter beside you is obviously an extra element of surrealism.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a cliche that having a child, becoming a parent, nothing can prepare you kind of practically or emotionally for that.
Yes.
It's a cliche because it's true.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
really do.
Yeah.
And so what for you are the things, whether in any part of your job or life, that have sort of caught you by surprise, or in terms of what you weren't expecting?
It's how heightened it's made my focus on kids, because I was already pretty focused on child wellbeing. Now there's this extra layer to it that I can only describe as being heightened. When I think about, whether we're making sure that families have enough income to provide for their kids, I think about that in very literal terms now. I think about how it would feel if I didn't feel like I could provide, or we were able to provide properly for Neve, or how it would feel if I heard Neve was being bullied in school, or it just heightens the way you view all of the things that I already cared about, but now has this extra layer of the personal to it.
So now all those policies are going to be specifically focused on Neve, isn't it?
Absolutely not. But it's reinforced for me the emphasis we were already placing on those issues. So, I already wanted to make sure that child poverty was a focus for us. Now I have that extra sentiment around it.
In terms of that crazy period and then all that happened that we don't need to rehearse, would you accept that the Labour was undercooked in terms of its readiness to be in government?
No, I wouldn't. I think when people level that, it's quite closely connected to people's view that we shouldn't be looking outwardly and seeking, the views of experts and developing up some of the work that we're doing. And I really push back against that. I'll give you an example. Today we've just launched the work that we want, the new penalties and rules we want to put around predatory lending. Now, we've developed up those proposals, having gone out to people who work in budget advisory services and said, what's going to make the biggest difference for you? And we've come up with a scheme that basically means you'll never pay more than 100% of what you loan. Now, we could have actually come back and just done that ourselves without asking the question. We might have ended up with an interest cap, but it might not have been what the community wanted. So I don't think we should be defensive about talking to people. And yet when people level that criticism about being undercooked, that's often what they mean.
Yeah, but because the argument goes that one of the roles of opposition isn't just to do the combative holding to account stuff that you're talking about, but also to develop policy.
Absolutely.
And that now it appears as though a lot of that is being outsourced once in government rather than being done.
Not at all. I mean, some of the things are straightforward. Like, we've got to do something about child poverty. So straight off the back, first 100 days, a package that we developed while we were in opposition. I helped design the Best Start payment. There was the changes we made to Working for Families and the winter energy payment. We did all of that from opposition. We also recognised from opposition we needed to do a lot around mental health. So we came up with rolling out nurses in schools because there was evidence behind that. But then at the same time, we heard from people who worked in the sector and they said, actually, we want you to come and talk to us before you go any further. So for us, it's always been about finding that balance between the two. Sometimes as well, you just don't have the resources from opposition. Great example is looking into abuse in state care. from opposition, you just can't safely roll out that piece of work. We needed to do that properly. These were people, highly vulnerable people. So I think we've got the balance right between the work that we've gone out and done alongside people and the work we did ourselves.
One of the things you were majoring on in the campaign and once you became Prime Minister was climate change. And famously you referred to it as the nuclear-free moment of a generation.
Yeah. I've upgraded my position on that a little bit.
How did you upgrade it?
Well, the sense that we were unified around the nuclear-free movement, and yet what we're doing on climate change is just, it is just that much harder because it's a call to action for everyone. And so I'm hoping we can get to the place of having that same unified moment around nuclear free that we need for climate change.
You mean in terms of bringing everyone on board?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's a big deal. And I mean, I'll come to that in just 1 second because the obviously there was the big IPCC report on Monday. Seismic in its implications.
Yep.
We all know that. The kind of hellscape that awaits us.
Yes.
And other joyous things.
I don't think they use that quite language, but essentially that's between the lines.
Yeah.
Yep.
But most of the week, you talked about it at the UN as well, but you spent most of the week saying how are we going to make it cheaper for people to burn petrol. It seems like a kind of weird juxtaposition that, you know?
No, we've always, first of all, looking at New Zealand's emissions profile, the biggest challenge for us actually sits in agriculture. Mm-hmm. Yes, our transport emissions profile, absolutely, we need to do work in that space, no doubt. That's why the excise that we generate is going into alternatives, like, for instance, public transport options, rail to the airport, significant transport infrastructure that needs to be built. That's why we have things like our excise. But at the same time, it needs to be a transition. And I can't deny that at the moment there are very few alternatives for people in large parts of our communities around alternative transport options. Now, we're trying to build those and quickly, but it's pretty jarring to in 1 year have a 40-cent increase. So that's what I'm acknowledging there. At the same time, we do need to move. We've set all our goals around 1.5 degrees. We've said net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We're trying to legislate and get universal buy-in so that we don't have an electoral cycle disrupting our long-term plans. And I hope that we'll lead the world in the research we do around food production, because 50% of our emissions come from agriculture. We can model to the world what it takes to bring down methane.
But relying on technology is not the way to go, is it? That's not the solution. I mean,
research and development is going to help us actually reduce down those emissions, not just offset, but I think actually it is a significant part of the answer. When the United States said they were going to go to the moon, they didn't have the answer on how they were going to get there. They just set the goal. And so that's what we need to do for agriculture. We know, for instance, that feed, the way that we even graze, all of that can have an impact on our emissions profile. But there is more work to do. And if we figure out the IP for that, we'll have something to sell to the world.
In terms of that point you made before about getting everyone on board, I mean, I've spent large part of my life trying to commission pieces and edit newspapers and websites to try and make people read this stuff. But basically, I was going to say people don't give a toss, and that's not fair. That's not true. But it is really hard for whatever reason, it's really hard to get people on board. So how are you going to... That's probably the big... political challenge as well, isn't it? It is,
and it's huge. But even if you think about that environment you were operating in 10 years ago, I feel at least positive that we've moved significantly from a debate that 10 years ago was whether or not climate change was real, now to a debate around how much we need to do and how quickly. 10 years ago, I got booed at a public meeting for talking about climate change. So the environment, when I first came into Parliament, a select committee was established to look at the science of climate change. So now to have moved to where where I'm still hopeful that we'll get political support from across the House for a zero carbon bill, I hope. That's a big shift. So let's feel positive about that. We can also feel positive that we have a farming leadership group that I meet with on a semi-regular basis who is acknowledging that that addressing climate change and what we do is imperative. Now, whether they're doing that from a branding perspective doesn't matter. The fact that we're all agreeing means that we've got a little bit of extra impetus. That means changing practice on the ground, though, and that's where it gets hard. We have a tool, for instance, Overseer, which enables us farm by farm to be able to have farm management practice changes in the way that we operate taken into account, so that people can even see if they're changing their emission profile at that individual level. Now, that's a powerful tool for behaviour change. We just need a little bit more of that happening.
The good news you had yesterday was the 5.5 billion surplus, which is higher than expected. And the argument that's made by Bernard Hickey.
Yes.
We'll call it
consistently.
The Hickey doctrine.
Yes. Borrow more.
Borrow more.
Yep.
We'll get money under 3%. Look at, the sun is shining, fix the roof, and there is so much that can be done for infrastructure. There's so much to be done. Climate change, all, mental health, transport, housing, homelessness, all this stuff. Why don't you just really go for it?
We are.
I'm not saying you're not doing stuff, so accept it. Accept it, all that. Do double that.
Yeah. So we are pushing out our debt track. We said the time it would take us to get debt down, and it fluctuates. So what we've seen, off this these Crown financial accounts released yesterday, shows our debt track at a particular point, but there will be variation in that. We said the time it would take us to get sustainably to 20% is going to take us longer than the last government, because we are borrowing more for the super fund and because we're borrowing more for Kiwi Build. The issue we have with Kiwi Build is not the government's, not our focus on building houses or lack of focus, it's just how quickly we can do it. Building 100,000 houses is pretty ambitious, and the struggle that we're having at the moment is finding the skills to do it, finding the companies to do it, finding the partnerships to deliver, and we are pulling out all of the stops. And that's the difficulty. Same with public and state housing, 6,400 we want to build. And that's really putting the squeeze on Housing New Zealand to be able to do that. So we are being pretty ambitious here, but we've got some other roadblocks in the way. We are also spending billions more than the last government. We are. What we had come out yesterday was a snapshot in time. Some of it's because spending that we were budgeting to spend is rolling over into the new year. It's been slightly delayed, so we need to take that into account. And also we need to take into account that essentially we've got still pretty significant debt, 57 billion. It's come down a bit, but pretty significant debt. So we've always constantly trying to balance being ready for a rainy day, but like making the investment that we need now.
I was reading back over some interviews during the campaign and immediately afterwards, and you used the word transformative a lot.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you use that lately. Maybe I've missed it, but is that still the project?
No, I have used, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about what we're trying to do on stuff that doesn't get as much coverage, first of all, having a government that says the housing market's broken, we're just going to build ourselves, that hasn't been done. Yes, we did it with state housing, but this is different. We are literally building houses in the market now for first home buyers because we failed them. Now that's a huge intervention to make, and one the last government wasn't brave enough to do because it has risk attached. The work that we've done on, and this doesn't grab headlines, but the Reserve Bank and changing up monetary policy, the work that we've asked the tax working group to do, to say, actually, we don't know whether we've got a fair tax system, and we want you to look at what it'll take to change that. Those are significant changes. Equally, what we'll leave behind, I hope, regardless of who's in government, on child poverty and holding ourselves to account, and on climate change, has the ability to leave a legacy that will go beyond this government. Transformation does take a bit of time, though. If there's anything I've learnt that I've struggled with, it's how long things take. And that's something that has been hard when you come in a hurry.
Would you like to see a 4-year term on that point?
It's interesting when I ask people about that. I'm yet to find someone that doesn't agree with the idea that actually there would be some merit in that. It's not something we're looking at. It's just because electoral reform like that takes quite a bit of cross-party buy-in. But it is fair to say 3 years feels short. Not when you're in opposition, though. It feels like an eternity.
Max Rashbrook wrote an essay early this week for leading website spinoff.co.nz.
Yes.
And he was sort of looking for how you might kind of articulate the philosophy of the government or whatever. And what the best he could come up with was the well-being policy, the well-being budget as being a kind of philosophical core. Do you think that's
I think that is fair. As much as these things might sound a bit dry, moving away from the principle that we've had internationally, where we report on our economic progress without much regard to whether or not that's been at the expense of the well-being of your people and your environment, has huge shortcomings, and we're pushing hard against that. So we're developing set of indicators that give us a real sense of how well we're doing, and then translating that into the way we drive our budgets. Now, if we do that, and we plan to, we will be the first in the world. The OECD has called for it for some time, and there's huge interest in what we're trying to do here in New Zealand.
Brunei do it or something like that?
Not as far as I understand, to the extent that we're looking to do it.
Gross national happiness.
Gross national happiness, yes, has been bandied around for a while as these individual measures, but what we're trying to do is embed it in the way we develop policy and the way we develop budgets.
Right. And the criticism will be that sort of sounds all very nice, but it's airy-fairy. But how is it?
We need to prove it. We need to prove it. Well, it's not in the sense that it'll change the way we make policy decisions. So, but I accept proof is in the pudding.
On one of the issues that's beleaguered you slightly recently is this Labour-led government question. I
honestly, I laugh because it's so.
You're going to say it's semantic.
It feels trivial to me.
Okay, but here's why it's not trivial.
Okay, go ahead. Make your case.
Because it manifestly is a Labour-led government.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
that's why I see this as trivial.
Right, but then you seem unwilling to now call it a Labour-led government.
It's a coalition government. I call it what it is.
But it's a Labour-led government. You
I'm the Labour. Yeah, I'm the Labour leader. We are the largest party in a coalition government.
And so what it seems like is there's the idea of there being this kind of unwieldy power in the form of the Deputy Prime Minister who just doesn't, because he doesn't like the sound of it. It's almost because it's trivial and petty that it takes on this meaning, if you will.
I don't give it that much thought, to be honest.
Right, but it's a Labour-led government, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're the biggest party. We wouldn't be there without the votes that we bring. But equally, I've got to be fair, we wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the two parties who stand either side of us supporting us too.
But my point is, it takes on this sort of feeling like some kind of sorcery. It's if you say Labour-led government, then something will burst.
No, and of course that's ridiculous. My point is, I actually don't think people care. I don't. Mm-hmm. And so therefore that translates into me not particularly caring either.
So on another issue facing this Labour-led government, something that absolutely isn't trivial.
I'm not correcting you. That shows me how much I care about this.
Say Labour-led government.
Labour-led government. And look, nothing has happened.
Oh dear. As I say, this is the current Prime Minister of New Zealand. Much less trivial. In the world,
yes,
a couple of things that have been in international headlines, especially lately. There's a Saudi journalist who seems likely to have been murdered in the Saudi embassy in Turkey. We've had the head of Interpol going missing in China and then resigning mysteriously. Various other things, a sense of Russian impunity and so on. And there has been commentary, some quite compelling commentary written that this reflects a lack of leadership in the world in terms of these are the sorts of things that wouldn't happen if you had a strong leadership coming from Washington, D.C. Does that sound persuasive to you?
Yeah, look, I think if I could speak more broadly rather than around just some individual cases, one thing I came away from the UN General Assembly feeling really strongly is actually there is a huge push and sentiment and support of maintaining the order that we have all fought for and tried to strengthen for so long. that, New Zealand in particular, we sat around the table when the United Nations was first formed and made the argument around us buying into a set of norms, a set of practices country to country, not just between government, but on behalf of our citizens around human rights. And we've been utterly consistent in that regard. There is a call for the reinforcement of those from a number of countries. And so I don't think we should discount the fact that still exists, regardless of what might be happening at a foreign policy level from one individual country or not. So maybe we just need to be a bit louder. New Zealand has always been loud, I'd like to think, but we need to seek that upholding of those rules and norms now more than ever.
We need to do it more than ever because there is some vacuum there.
Well, I think that there has been some challenge to those rules and norms. Trade is an obvious example. Let's call it what it is. There's been a bit of a backing away from the WTO. There's been a tit-for-tat trade war, and we need to uphold the principles that we all signed up to. And so that's the position we take on that, as much as we do on human rights.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Talofa lava. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.